When you think of Good Friday, what comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's pretty somber, dark, tragic even. It's a day for quiet reflection on suffering and death. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, from a certain point of view, it's not a day of tragedy at all, but a day of absolute triumph? Let's dive into that idea. The big question that really hangs over this day is about loss, isn't it? When you look at the story, you see betrayal, you see injustice, and the brutal death of an innocent man. By all accounts, it looks like the ultimate defeat. But is that how every theological tradition actually sees it? Well, in a particular stream of Christian thought, what's known as the Reformed tradition, the cross is viewed in a completely different light. It's not seen as some tragedy that God had to scramble to fix. Nope. It's seen as the absolute peak of a divine plan, the most triumphant moment in all of history. So how on earth do you get from a brutal execution to a declaration of victory? Well, it all starts with one core concept. The key to unlocking this whole idea of victory is a concept they call the Great Exchange. And I want you to think of it like a profound divine transaction that happens right there at the moment of the crucifixion. Now, the engine that drives this exchange is a doctrine with a really big name: penal substitutionary atonement. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but the idea itself is actually pretty straightforward. Penal just refers to a penalty, and substitutionary means taking the place of someone else. So the belief here isn't just that Christ died for people, but that he died as them, literally taking on the specific legal penalty their sin deserved in order to satisfy divine justice. And this idea isn't new. It's rooted in ancient texts. Take this one from the prophet Isaiah, written centuries before the event. You see how it frames the suffering? It's not random, it's purposeful, and it's substitutionary. It's being endured on behalf of other people for their wrongdoing. And this slide? It illustrates that great exchange perfectly. See, it's a two-way street. Theologians use this old accounting word, imputed. It basically means our sin, our entire moral debt, was credited to Christ's account. And in return, his perfect record, his righteousness, was credited to the believer's account. It's a complete transfer of assets, both the bad and the good. And this idea gets even more specific. Theologians in this tradition talk about Christ's passive and active obedience. His passive obedience was his suffering, passively taking on the penalty on the cross. But his active obedience? That was his entire life of perfect moral living. And here's the crucial part. A believer doesn't just get a pardon, like their slate is wiped clean. No, they also get a perfect record credited to their name. Okay, so if this great exchange happened, was it a desperate, last-minute rescue mission? Or was it something else entirely? And that brings us to the second major point from this perspective, the idea of a sovereign plan. See, from this viewpoint, the cross was never an accident. It was not plan B, it wasn't a good idea that went horribly wrong. It was understood to be the unchangeable, predetermined plan of God from before time began, all to save his people. The chaos, the cruelty we see in this framework, those were the very tools used to bring about a guaranteed triumphant outcome. And this leads to another really distinct concept, called particular redemption. A lot of people believe Christ's death made salvation possible for anyone who might choose to accept it. But this view makes a critical distinction. It argues that the death of Christ actually secured and guaranteed the salvation of a specific group of people. In other words, the mission wasn't just to open a door, it was to carry certain people all the way through it. And that's why a verse like this one becomes so incredibly powerful for someone who holds this view. The atonement stops being this grand, abstract event that happened out there. It becomes a deeply personal, specific act. It's not just that he gave himself for humanity in general, but that he loved me and gave himself for me. So, let's connect the dots. If the cross was a pre-planned, triumphant act that actually secured salvation, well, that completely changes the meaning of Christ's final words. And this brings us to the absolute climax of the story, the finished work. On the cross, right before his death, Jesus uttered a single Greek word, tetelestai. And that word, tetelestai, is almost always translated as, "it is finished." But what exactly was finished? What did he mean by that? Okay, this is where the historical context gets absolutely fascinating. Archaeologists have found ancient business receipts and tax documents from that time. And you know what word they found written across them? Tetelestai. It was a common commercial term, and it meant the debt had been paid in full. The obligation was completely, totally satisfied. So you see, from this perspective, "it is finished" isn't the gasp of a dying victim. It is the victory cry of a king. It's a declaration that the mission has been accomplished, the debt has been canceled, the sacrifice has been accepted, and the work of redemption is done, complete. Nothing more needs to be added. Now, if the work is truly finished, if the debt is paid in full, what does that actually mean for how a person lives their life? This leads us to the practical part of this whole theology. What is life like on the other side of a completed work? Well, the implications are just profound, and they call for a series of responses that kind of flow from one another. It all starts with gratitude, just sheer thankfulness that the Holy One took your place. And that naturally leads to humility, right? The realization that there was nothing in you to earn this rescue. And from there comes this deep confidence, knowing that your standing is secure because of a finished work, not your own performance. And all of that, it just culminates in worship, a response to being loved with such a sacrificial love. And this all boils down to one central, powerful idea. The main response is to move from a life of striving to a life of resting. Think about it. If the debt is truly stamped paid in full, then any attempt on our part to add to that payment is just, well, it's unnecessary. The core invitation is to simply rest in what has already been done for you. And if you want one verse that just perfectly wraps all of this up, this is it. It's the great exchange in a nutshell. The one who was without sin was treated as if he were a sinner, so that those who believe could be treated as if they had the perfect righteousness of God himself. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. In a world that is constantly telling us to hustle, to earn our place, to prove our worth, if salvation is truly a finished work, a debt stamped paid in full, then what does it really look like? And what does it feel like to simply rest?